Hello and welcome to another video tutorial on how to use C++. Today we are going to look at how to manage our data in appropriate structures. So in detail we are going to take a closer look at arrays, vectors and strings. And for this we are going to create a new project as usual, so let's call it arrays. Click next here, empty project, and add a new element, and we call it main.cpp. Add, and then as usual we have to include our input-output stream, so include IO stream. And next we have to use our standard namespace, and then we start our main, and we have to include the return value 0. Well, so far we have only been using variables, and the disadvantage of variables is that we can only save one specific value in them. So if we want to process more data at once, we have to use something else. Let's take, for example, we have a set of measuring data, or we want to get a picture in our program, or let's take the example of lottery numbers. Then we have to use something that lets us save multiple values in one type. So, and this is what arrays are for. An array is a set of memory spaces for data of the same data type. So for this we type in int, so the data type of our array is integer. Then the name of the array is Lottozahlen, so lottery numbers, and then in square brackets we have to set the number of spaces, so the size of the array. So we can comment here, the array has 6 elements. And now we want to write some values into our array. For that we type in the name of the array, Lottozahlen, and then we type in the position at which we want to set which value. So you can see here we want to write in the first position. Beware that the counting starts at 0. At the first position we want to write number 35. Then we can also output this by typing in the cout function and the number of the array and the position. Don't forget the end line. And then if we run this, then we see that number 35 is in the console. But we can also initialize the array values at the definition, which might be a little less cumbersome if we have a lot of values. So for this we delete that line, and instead of the end here we write the array consists of curly brackets, and then we put in the values here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, like this. And then if we have this output function, we see that number 1 is the output, as we want to have the first value given out here. To see if this works, we can type in cout of the array number 5, and then you see that the last position, 6, is in the output. For this type of initialization, we don't actually need to set the size of the array, so we can just leave out the number 6 here and leave the input numbers. And if we run this, you can see that the output is still the same. If we set the size again and then just type in 0 as elements of our array, then our array is just initialized with zeros. So you can see here that the first and the last element both are 0, which is also the case for all the other elements in this array. So this is how to save multiple values in one data type. And what we have seen so far is a so-called one-dimensional array. But of course, we can also save elements in a multi-dimensional array. To see that, I'll comment this out. And we have the example of a chessboard. And the size of each dimension is expressed in square brackets. So for this example, we type in short for the data type short. Then the name of the array is chessboard. And then we initialize it with 8 by 8 cells. So we have 8 cells in each direction. And we initialize it with 0. So now we have an 8 by 8 array, and in theory an array of any dimension is possible, but you have to keep the memory in mind. And of course we can also see the output values from our chessboard. Let's type in here the value of the position 0, 1. Don't forget the end line again, and then of course the output is 0 because we initialized every single cell with a 0. So the disadvantage of these arrays is that you have to initialize the size of it in the beginning. And this leads to errors because if you want to write values beyond the end, this will lead into crashes or unexpected results. Therefore, we have an alternative method for storing multiple values at the same time, which are containers. The one container I want to show you right now is the container vector. So it's also therefore storing multiple values of the same data type. But additionally to the value itself, it also stores the current size. To show you this, I'm gonna just take this out again into the comments. And if we want to use vectors, we of course have to include it first. So include vector. And every vector can hold data of a specific type. So the syntax of this vector container is now vector. Then in angle brackets, we type in the data type, short, and then the name of this vector container is lottery numbers again. So we can add a comment here that says we have the type of the container, we have the data type, and we have the name of it. The length of it now can be initialized by setting curly brackets after the name of the vector container. So in this case, we take again size 6. And now to initialize the values inside of this container, it's a little different than before, because now if we want to initialize it by 0, we have to set a comma right into our curly brackets and add the 0 after that. Now to access values in our container, the method is the same as before, so that's why I'm gonna just copy these 2 lines, and we can paste them into here. So if we want to have these values in our output, we can just use these. If we run this, then you can see that the output is of course 0 because we initialized all the lottery numbers with 0. And in the same way, we can also change values in the vector container by typing in the name of our array and then the position we want to change, and set this to, for example, 35. So now the output for the first element is 35. The advantage of these vector containers is now that we can use element functions. For example, we can use a point operator within the element functions. So if we type in the name and then point, you can see we have a lot of functions in this list. And for now, we want to use the function push back, which adds a value at the end of the vector. So if we type in push back and then in brackets number 99, this means that it will add the number 99 as an extra field at the end of the vector. So if we put the last value now, the 7th value in the output, we can see that this now is 99. Another important element function is the function size. So we type in the name, point size, and let's just see this in the output after and before we added a value to our vector. So let's output this here and at this position before. Then run. So we can see this is the first value, this is the 6th value. Then we have the function size, which is 6. Then we add a value to it, and let's see the size again, which is now 7, which is correct because we added a value to our 6 values before. And then lastly, we have the 7th value is then 99. Next, I'm just gonna delete these lines here. Another function which is quite important, or at least used very often, is the function of clear. So we have the point operator and then clear. This function deletes all elements inside of the vector. So if we see the output before and after the clear of the size, and if we run this, you can see before we have the size of 7, and then we clear everything, and after that we only have the size 0. So that's it for vectors. I can advise you to try out these element functions as much as you like. Next, we want to look at the string library. To use this one, we also have to include the strings, just like the vectors before. And strings have the possibility to save strings of characters. So it's very similar to the arrays we've seen before, but now with characters. The advantage is that it's much more convenient to use. Now we want to create a string. This is just like before, done by typing in string, then the name of it, and we choose prename. Then there are different types of initialization. So for prename, I'm just gonna use this one. You type in the equal sign and then in quotation marks the prename auto. For the string of the surname, I'm just going to use a different method by using the brackets and inside of these the quotation marks, and let's say the last name is Müller. Then of course we can see this in the output. Just type in cout prename end line, then of course we just see the prename auto, but we can also add the surname by, let's add another space here, and then surname, and then we have Otto Müller. And again we have functions for strings. So for example, we can see the size of a string. So in this case, just how many letters does this string have, so we can output the size of our prename, and we can also do this for the last name. So let's just see this in the output. Let's run this, and you can see we have 4 letters for the prename Otto and 7 for the last name Müller. Again, my advice is to just look at the different functions we have here. There are many useful ones like insert to edit the string, or find, or many more, just which are useful, for example, to generate file names, which is going to be explained later on. The advantages of a string are again the flexibility. So the length is flexible and you can just change it. And also the elements of a string can be compared. So today we've learned that how to use an array and how to assign values, how to initialize some, how to output the values, that there are two-dimensional or even multi-dimensional arrays. Then we've learned about vectors, that they are more convenient because of the element function. So for example, this pushback function to add values, you can access the size or clear and delete all the values. And we've learned about strings. So that's it for today. Thank you for your attention.